Our name is Ghosts Want You Dead. As we enter the bleak darkness of the coming season, where the death-like sleep of winter pulls us down into our own sorrows, perhaps we should all invest in some bright light therapy lamps.
Gruß von Krampus, Rebecca.
Dem
Krampusnacht, I guess.
Krampusnacht.
You speak a little bit of German, right?
Krampusnacht. Yeah,
Okay.
it would be
Say Gruß von Krampus to the people.
Gruß von Krampus, meine Schatzes.
This week, my husband and I went to the animal shelter to procure a little dog, and we were trying to think of a name for the little dog, and we are partial to old lady names. And we were trying to think of one, and the one that we thought of came from my family. There was a distant relation that I never met myself, but recalled my mother and grandmother talking to on the phone, and she has a funny name. And that is what we ended up choosing for the dog. But I couldn't remember how exactly I was related to this woman, so I looked it up on a genealogy website and came across this giant family tree website that, because it is user edited, could be entirely bullshit, but has my family tree going back to like the BC times. So we spent a period last week just looking up how much cousins everyone is to everyone.
We are 12th cousins.
I thought was it
You
12?
said 12.
I thought it was like 11th twice removed or something.
Oh,
Or maybe your mom was my 11th cousin, so
Sure.
you're also but removed.
sure, something along those lines.
I believe we also discovered that my husband is my 8th cousin.
Yes, which isn't gross, but it's just
In
still
the
odd.
spirit of
The
the
incest.
family relationships on Dark Shadows,
Yeah.
yes, my
Yeah.
husband is my cousin.
Aw.
Well, before we get down to business this week, a caveat. We will probably rush through this because nothing much happens in this stretch of 5 episodes.
Sure doesn't.
So, episode 61, Victoria Winters, reminds us that Collinwood is creepy, and so is Sam's house, I guess. I couldn't really tell what she was on about.
Yeah, she said something about how the past is terrible and won't die. And I was like, girl, yeah, I get that.
Thinking about your ex-husbands.
Well, not all of them. We left off with Burke barging in to Maggie and Sam's house with Victoria Winters.
Burke is still inviting himself for dinner while Maggie tries to gracefully decline.
Yeah, Maggie's like,
You're like, gee, Burke, we'd love to have you, but we already have
yeah, we have
company.
company.
Sam is not being quite so graceful about it, but
Yeah,
Burke
he's just, you
is.
can't just come up in here and ask for dinner. And Burke is being kind of hilarious
Well,
about
he's
it.
behaving like they are the assholes for not wanting their dinner crashed, and like, but I thought we were friends, and I used to come over for dinner all the time, and
And then he's like, it's fine, Maggie, just make me a sandwich. Like, because they're trying to be like, oh, well, maybe we don't have enough food for you. And he's like, well, just make me a sandwich then. Go on. And I thought that was funny. So Maggie goes off to check dinner.
And this is all to a very tense score,
Mhm.
which I thought was dumb because it made this situation seem much more ominous than it was. Opening credits. Vicky is suspicious of Burke's bullshit, so he tries to shoo her into the kitchen with Maggie,
Where she
but
belongs.
Maggie foils his plans by emerging. Burke leads Vicky through repeating what Sam had told her about the manslaughtering. Then he offers his side of the story, which we have all heard 2,000 times, but there are slight variations this time. Now we learn that, in addition to the fact that Roger lied on the witness stand, that Burke was initially driving when they left the bar, but he was too drunk, and Burke says he definitely recalls Roger making him pull over so that Roger could drive before the accident happened. Vicky points out, well, if you were that drunk, you can't really be certain when what happened, but he insists that he is. Vicky says, oh, it's just so hard to believe that Mr. Collins would lie, which is very funny given she has lied to him on more than one occasion and been caught. So, gee, no, this man who has lied to me and everyone else multiple times surely wouldn't lie. Maggie is giving Burke the stink eye, and Vicky is unsure if she believes him. And Burke snidely is like, well, why don't you go into the kitchen and make Sam come out here and talk to me? And Maggie does go to look for Sam, but he has fled through the back door, and Burke says that Sam is running from himself. Sam wanders into the lobby of the inn to try and retrieve the letter to Maggie in the safe. The clerk is chit-chatting about Bill's death, and then when Sam tries to snatch the letter, the clerk insists that he'll have to call Maggie since that's her property, and Sam acts a fool and yells and eventually gives up. Back at the house, Maggie has called the Blue Whale to try and find Sam. Burke is telling Vicky that Maggie thinks Sam killed Bill. He's grilling Maggie, and Vicky tells him to back off and stop being a bully.
And then he turns to bully her and is like, hey, I'm upset about this. And I will say, like, he's been bellowing a lot during this whole encounter. And just at one point in the beginning of all that, he's like, I want to talk about my manslaughter charge. And he's just yelling, and he's putting on more of a show than he normally does.
Somebody ought to
Stirring
pull
it
him
up.
aside and say, perhaps everybody wouldn't think you were some villain quite so much if you didn't go around yelling at everybody all the
Yeah,
time.
it's true.
Anyway, Burke is asking Vicky if she was at Collinwood on the night of Bill's death, and she explains what happened. Maggie is in tears and asking Burke to leave, but he won't. Burke explains the purpose of the Manslaughter Club meeting on the night of Bill's death. Maggie refuses to believe that Sam is involved in all of this. Burke does finally leave, and Vicky tries to comfort Maggie, and she calls Burke a psychopathic liar.
Before Burke leaves, Maggie says, you know what kind of a man he is. And I don't know if you were thinking this, but I was like, an awful, cowardly, abusive drunk. Like, but then Burke is like, oh, well, we'll see what kind of man he is, and then leaves.
Well, Maggie is operating on how things used to be rather than how they are. And so she's telling Vicky the fairy tale about how Sam used to just be wonderful and everybody loved him back in the day.
Yeah.
And she admits to Vicky that Sam has been weirder than usual since Burke came back to town. At the inn, Burke returns, and the clerk, who is just as gossipy as Maggie is,
I bet they have a good time up there telling
is
everybody's business
in
back and forth.
everybody's business and telling everybody's business.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm sure that's a fun workplace.
Right.
But the clerk mentions to Burke that Sam had been there and then explains the whole thing about the letter in the safe. At which point, Sam creeps out from the shadows and stops Burke from going up to his room and invites himself up to Burke's room.
Ooh, I want to go to Burke's room.
End credits. Episode 62 to Victoria Winters reminds us it's dark and creepy at Collinwood. Roger looks dramatically out the French windows, which, in a shocking twist, are open this time. In Burke's hotel room, Burke is asking Sam why he ran away from their shitty little dinner party. Sam asks for a drink, but Burke denies him, and so Sam makes a gross face for too long at the camera.
Yeah.
Opening credits. Sam is doing his usual pretentious rambling and isn't really saying anything at all, but talks for a while, and then says he's just mad that Burke crashed dinner. Sam says he panicked and ran away because he didn't want to argue in front of Maggie, which, yeah, that would be too much for the poor girl. It's fine to grab her and shake her and scream in her face when the mood strikes you, but she couldn't possibly witness an argument.
Yeah, Sam's garbage.
After Sam does seem willing to talk, Burke relents and offers him a drink. Over at Collinwood, Roger ambushes Vicky in the foyer as she's returning from the Evanses.
Roger's asking her about what happened and keeps grabbing her and insisting. And it's very creepy and kind of date rape coded to me. I didn't like it.
Yeah, Vicky starts out saying, I don't want to talk about it, but Roger grabs her by the arm twice to stop her and then is all smiles and please join me for a chat while he is physically dragging her by the arm into the drawing room.
He says something along the lines of, you can't just arouse someone's curiosity and walk away. Ugh.
She insists for a third time that she does not want to talk about it, but he won't drop it. So Vicky cuts through his bullshit and is like, so you must want to talk about the manslaughtering, huh?
He's trying to be all chummy now. He's changed tact and is just syrupy, trying to be friendly and elicit gossip from her. And she's very direct, like you said.
And she goes through what Sam told her about the manslaughtering and then also what Burke told her about the manslaughtering. Back in Burke's room, Burke is trying to get Sam to admit that he knows something about the manslaughtering. Sam is trying to get Burke to just forget about the whole thing because you've already done your time and nothing you do now is going to change that, which, I mean, I suppose that's true, but I think I would probably want revenge in that situation.
Oh, sure.
Sam doesn't want Maggie involved, and they yell. It's not particularly interesting.
And then he asks, did you kill Bill Malloy? And he says he didn't.
Burke accuses Sam of calling Bill's house and then killing him. Sam grabs Burke by the lapel and yelps in a very high-pitched way that he didn't do it, and that was funny.
Oh, yeah, that was good. I
That
forgot about that.
may have been the highlight of these episodes. He is pretentious a bit more, and then we pop back over to the drawing room at Collinwood, where Roger is asking Vicky if she believes that he did the manslaughtering. She is non-committal and is kind of just like, I don't know, really just the whole thing was kind of upsetting. And it comes up that Vicky saw Roger on the night of Bill's death at the house on the phone at 10:30, and this piques Roger's interest. Vicky insists that Roger left the house no later than 10:35, but Roger insists that he didn't leave until 10:50.
And Vicky's kind of like, well, if you say so.
Yeah, Vicky's like, I don't really fucking care. Like,
Whatever. Yeah, she's ready for bed and is over it and goes to bed.
Roger insists that she go with his version of events, and she's like, sure. And excuses herself to bed, but then when Roger leaves the drawing room, he catches her on the phone in the foyer, and he's sure that it was Burke and that she was telling on him to Burke. It wasn't, it was Maggie, and she admits that, and she's also tired of Roger's bullshit.
Yeah, she's kind of like, none of your beeswax.
This is when he becomes sweet, like you were
I thought he was
saying
earlier.
No, he was just grilling her, and Now he apologizes for being rude and is trying to be pals and offers to set her up with a cushy job in Florida.
Get
And
her the hell out of there.
she declines and he calls her a fool, and amusingly, she doesn't disagree.
Well, she snarks and is like, probably, right? Messing with y'all.
And she watches him get his hat and coat and storm out of the house. Back at the inn in Burke's room, they're still having the same boring argument, and Burke finally dismisses Sam and says that if Sam didn't kill Bill, then Roger did. End credits.
Yep.
Episode 63.
Victoria Winters talks about clocks and stuff. Also, Collinwood is spooky, but mostly it was something about clocks.
It is creepy and quiet at Collinwood, but the clock is loud, which it has never been before, by
Yeah.
the way. In this episode, there's a very pronounced, almost digital sounding
Sure, yeah.
second ticking for the huge grandfather clock in the foyer that has never been present before, but they make a thing of it this time. Anyway, Liz is weird. Liz descends the stairs.
She's back after being missing from the last 2 episodes, which might be why it was a bit boring. And she descends the stairs looking dreamy.
At the Blue Whale, Carolyn and Joe enter to the happy jukebox song. But Carolyn doesn't want to dance. She's grumpy and thinks it's too loud at the bar, and I relate to all of that. Carolyn wants to know why she's grumpy, and Joe says it's because of Bill. Opening credits. Joe is trying to cheer her up, and Carolyn tells him that he's a sweet guy, and she plasters on a fake smile. Now, I love Joe, but here he's being awfully impatient about, gee, don't you think you should get over your surrogate father figure dying like 3 days ago?
Yeah.
It's kind of ruining our date. Then I wanted to dance, but you're sad about someone you're close to having died this week.
Yeah.
And she agrees to dance after all, so it works, but I
Well, I
thought that
also
was
felt
pretty shitty of Joe.
Yeah, no, it really was. I think she agreed to dance though because he's pushing about why she's upset about it and is like, "Wait, you don't think someone like pushed him?" And she's like, "Nah, let's dance." Like she's like, Let's not talk about this anymore. I don't want to think about my surrogate dad possibly being murdered." And Joe's content to do that and is like, "Sweet, I get to dance instead of listen to you be sad."
Back in the foyer at Collinwood, the clock ticks, ticks, ticks away as creepy Matthew enters and goes into the drawing room.
Lurking about. And
Well,
Liz
he's
is
not lurking, he's creeping. Liz is lurking
Well, she's
as
not
she's
lurking.
sitting
She's
silently in the drawing room and being all still and looking severe.
Yeah, she's sitting and staring sadly into nothing, which is my personal favorite pastime. I have no hate for that.
He asks if she's all right, and she says, I guess so. And he's trying to get her to cheer up about Bill being dead, just like Joe and Carolyn.
Yeah. Then she does ask him as he's turning to leave if there were any marks on Bill's body and when he, pushed him back into the water, and Matthew says no. She then goes to her favorite pastime, staring sadly out the window instead, and Matthew asks if they think
Matthew wants to know why she asked, and she explains the blow to the head in the autopsy report. Matthew blames the rocks and the water, and Liz says, well, yeah, that's what the sheriff thought too, but Liz clearly suspects something is up. Back at the Blue Whale, the melancholy song is playing now. The one that sounds like Don't They Know It's the End
Yeah,
of the World,
does,
which is
which is
funny
fun.
because Joe and Carolyn are still talking about Bill, and Maggie joins them, and she's looking for either Sam or Burke.
Carolyn asks Maggie why she's here in this den, and Maggie makes an adult child of an alcoholic joke about this being her dad's personal club. And then she does say she is looking for her father or Burke and says that, well, Burke can pretty much fuck right off. Joe cracked me up because he's like, yeah. Here, here, another round for the lady. He was like, fuck Burke.
Maggie has taken after her shitty father and won't really say what's happening and is just being vague and dramatic.
She says something about the end of the world.
Carolyn must ask because she loves Burke, like, what do you have against Burke? And Maggie's like, just the end of the world.
And then the end of the world song is playing and it's funny. But it seemed jazzier. Was it a happier, peppier version of it? I don't
It's
know.
not that song. It just sounds
No, I know it just
similar
sounds
to
like
it.
it. She does say something, about he's basically, fucking with her pops and being a dirty gossip, and that's her job. So
And then she tells us, but not so much them, because they don't know what's going on, but we do, that she's going to visit Roger. Back in the drawing room at Collinwood, Matthew is concerned that Burke will continue to make trouble for Liz, and she agrees and says, well, there's nothing they can do to stop him. And he walks away with a renewed sense of purpose. Liz goes out to the foyer to regard the clock and then heads for the stairs, but a knock at the door produces Maggie, who asks to see Roger. Liz asks if he's expecting her. She says no, but it's important, so Liz lets her in.
and she's also kind of like, who are you again? Like, oh, you're Sam Evans' daughter? Like, she was confused as to who this woman was turning up on her doorstep.
Well, I mean, that would make sense
Yeah.
because she doesn't leave the house. I don't know how old Maggie is supposed to be. I don't really know how old any of them are supposed to be. Like, Carolyn is probably somewhere between 16 and 20.
I would probably guess that Carolyn's around 19. I think it's been mentioned, perhaps. I
And
don't know.
we know that Vicky is older than her since she is her illegitimate half sister.
Yeah.
That would have to have been born and shipped off to the foundling home before Liz's husband turned up. Liz not having left the house in 18 years, so she
Yeah.
may not have ever seen Maggie.
Yeah, this is true.
But anyway, Liz tells her that she's going to go see if Roger is in, but then changes her mind and comes back and is like, yeah, before I go see if Roger's in, exactly why the fuck are you in my house?
Right.
Maggie would prefer, however, to talk to Roger. They do talk a bit about the Manslaughter Club meeting, and Maggie kind of calls Liz a bitch in a fun way because she's not answering the questions that she's asking. And what does she say about, like, I've only ever seen this house from the outside where it looks scary and cold, but it's like that in here too, 'cause you're a bitch.
Because you're a bitch. Yeah, that was definitely the vibe, and I got that. I should have made a note of that. That was funny.
And Liz says to all of Maggie's questions several variations of, well, why don't you ask your dad?
Right.
And she gives up and is tired of this poor in her house and goes off to actually look for Roger. Back at the Blue Whale, Matthew enters and Carolyn is surprised to see him. He's looking for Burke and he tells Carolyn to tell her mom that Matthew says that everything is going to be all right. And Carolyn says to Joe that Matthew seems strange tonight, which, like, how can you tell?
Yeah. It's like a creepy
Doesn't
Eeyore
seem
character all the time.
any stranger than normal.
Yeah,
That's
no.
kind of his default. He's over at a table sitting and staring into space, and now the sad song is playing. And Joe and Carolyn had left, but now they come back because Carolyn wants to know why Matthew is looking for Burke.
He doesn't want to tell her, and she keeps pushing. And he says that he's caused problems for the family since he got here.
And he won't say straight up his intentions, but they infer Matthew thinks that Burke may have had something to do with Bill's death. He doesn't agree to this. He only repeats for Carolyn to tell Liz that he's going to straighten everything out. Back at Collinwood, Liz returns and tells Maggie that Roger isn't home and also that whatever Burke has been saying about Roger isn't true. Liz says that Roger told the truth on the stand and Burke's conviction was legit. Maggie realizes she's not going to get anything out of this old bitch and starts to leave. Liz stops her to warn her about how scary Burke is. And Carolyn walks in on this and asks Liz if she thinks that Burke is capable of murder. Liz says that she does. End credits. Episode 64. Victoria Winters reminds us that she was creeped out when she first came to Collinwood, and she is still creeped out, but now has more specific reasons for it. In the drawing room, Carolyn is on one. Maggie has left, and Carolyn is furious with Liz. She demands to know why Maggie was there and what her concern about her dad has to do with Burke. Carolyn says it is horrible that Liz thinks Burke killed Bill. Liz pulls a face. Opening credits. Liz says that she did not say that. She thinks Bill's death was an accident, and she's annoyed at Carolyn for trying to defend Burke's honor. And she goes to stare dramatically out the window, but Carolyn isn't done with her and
Yeah.
follows.
She's real mad about it and stomps off over to the window to look out at like it's a cigarette she's gonna smoke. She was just like, bum, bum, like storming off, but Carolyn does follow to badger her.
And Carolyn asks if Liz said any of this to Matthew. She explains her run-in with him at the Blue Whale and relays Matthew's message, and they start to put together that Matthew aims to kill Burke. At the Blue Whale, a groovy new song is playing as Burke enters. He greets Matthew, and Matthew is creepy and grabs Burke by the arm and insists that he sit. Burke insists that he release his grip, and then when Matthew says it's about Bill, Burke sits down
Yeah.
to a dramatic musical sting.
This is where I thought that Burke looked particularly disheveled and wind-tossed and handsome, but
I see.
that's neither here nor there.
Back in the Collinwood drawing room, Liz is calling the Blue Whale looking for Matthew. Liz is playing surprised and innocent about all this, but I can see the possibility that when she talked to Matthew, she knew exactly what she was doing and was basically sicking him on Burke.
It's very possible. I don't know. I didn't necessarily infer that from the conversation she had with him, but she knows that Matthew is a weirdo that is pushing bodies back into water, supposedly. Like, but I think she could have known for sure.
Yeah, I feel like she did, like this was her plan. But they are interrupted by a call from Sheriff George warning them that Burke is on a rampage, which is a little bit dramatic.
He is.
Basically, he's
Going around bellowing at
bellowing
folks.
at
Yeah,
everybody.
he's just hollering at everyone.
And I wouldn't call that a rampage.
Well, I think that George and this is addressed later, I think, as well, but I think George is threatened by Burke doing all the police work and like going around and questioning everyone. And so I think that's why Sheriff George, oh, he's not Sheriff, he's just Sheriff. He only gets one. That's why Sheriff George is calling it a rampage. He's like, he's going around town doing my job and he better stop.
But he implies that Burke is coming to kill Roger or something, so that if Burke shows up, she needs to call. Liz explains about Matthew's potentially murderous intentions that she totally didn't engineer on purpose. Back at the Blue Whale, Matthew is telling Burke that he does intend to kill him. He laments lying to Liz by asking the waiter to tell her on the phone that he wasn't there. And he insists that Burke leave town this very night. And they yell at each other, and it doesn't get violent until Burke calls Liz a neurotic weirdo. And then Matthew tries to strangle him. But conveniently, Sheriff George has just come in.
Dun,
So
dun, 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 the cavalry's here.
he separates them and drags them both down to his office, where he separates them like children, which is funny.
The extras at the whale are all shaking their heads at the drama of it all. And then we cut to the sheriff's office. Sheriff George sits them both down and he says he ought to book both of them. And Burke snarks off about being surprised that he would book anyone from Collinwood, which again is that George is soft on the Collinses because they have great wealth and influence on the town.
Which is probably not incorrect.
Right.
But Matthew says that Burke doesn't care about Bill at all. He's just trying to bother the Collinses and he won't stand for it. So George tells Matthew to wait outside and he isn't sure if he's going to arrest him or not. This is when George tells Burke to stop investigating Bill's death. Back at Collinwood in the drawing room, Carolyn warns that if anything happens to Burke, it will be all Liz's fault.
Yeah, she's just pissed at her mom.
And Liz, in an effort to get Carolyn off of Burke's side of things, explains all of the whole manslaughter club business, and Carolyn is confused.
Yeah, and Liz is kind of like, well, you've got to pick your pony, kid. Would you rather believe that your sweet, sexy uncle sent an innocent man to prison, or your precious Burke is a liar who's trying to destroy the family name?
Back at the sheriff's office, Burke explains that he had been to see Sam and he's accusing the sheriff of doing a shitty job, and George threatens to arrest him. Burke repeats that either I'd like to point out in my notes here with my empathy towards Liz that I typed Bill here instead of Burke, right? It is easy to get all these dudes that are always yelling at people mixed up.
There are a lot of yelling men in this show.
Anyway, Burke repeats that either Sam or Roger must have killed Bill. George tells Burke to go back to the hotel and leave everybody alone. Burke leaves, but not without one last implication that the sheriff is on the Collins payroll.
Yeah.
George gives Matthew a gentle scolding and sends him home, even though he caught him in the act of trying to choke someone to death.
Which, kind of backs up Burke's assessment of the situation and, ACAB and whatnot. So
back in the drawing room, Liz laments that Carolyn didn't get out of town 60 episodes ago when she was trying to make her do that. Carolyn is bummed out because she cannot reconcile her lust for Burke and her lust for Uncle Roger now that she knows the nature of their enmity. Liz sends her up to bed, like we love to do on this show.
Send people to bed.
And then she calls the sheriff's office, but is interrupted by a knock at the door. She thinks it's going to be the sheriff bringing Matthew back, but instead it is Burke. Suspenseful music sting. End credits.
Dun, dun, dun.
Episode 65. Victoria Winters name checks the dark shadows at Collinwood. In the foyer, Burke is demanding to know where Roger is. Liz asks him to leave, but he refuses to do so until he's seen Roger. She asks him again to leave. He refuses again, saying he's staying until Roger gets back. Opening credits. In the drawing room, Liz wants to know exactly what Burke thinks he's doing. She calls him a rude young man and wants him to leave, and Burke is mad because they are rich or something and is going on about his dad not being as fancy as them, and he insists that he's going to wait. She wants to know why, and they make more classist jabs at one another.
Yeah, they're having a standoff, and
which is funny because Burke is also rich now, much richer than she is.
Well, and he does bring that up too. It's like, I was poor, I grew up poor, I fought in the streets, I had to walk up the hill 5 miles each way, but now I could buy you 10 times over. They're just having this pissing contest, and she threatens to call Sheriff
Well,
George.
Burke is casing the joint
Oh,
and
yeah.
valuing the antiques and offering to buy them. And that's when she threatens to call the police. And he tells her, go on ahead and do that. But he's still not leaving. And she picks up the phone to call the sheriff, but then changes her mind. At the Blue Whale, Roger is calling the Evanses' house looking for Sam, but
Unsurprisingly.
Maggie says he's not there, but Sam turns out to be behind him at the bar.
Unsurprisingly.
He is drunk. Roger invites him to a table, but Sam wants to stay at the bar. Roger insists, so Sam reluctantly joins him, and Roger is put out that he had to look all over town for Sam, and they're going back and forth over the same old shit, and Roger knocks Sam's drink over.
And I will say that although I hate Sam, this particular drunken case tickled me a little just because he was snarking at Roger and kind of poking the bear in ways that were humorous. I can't remember anything specific, but he was actually kind of funny drunk this time to me.
I did not observe that. Roger has knocked Sam's drink over, and Sam asks for another drink. And Roger continues to question him, and Sam asks for another drink. Also, he thinks that Roger killed Bill. Back at Collinwood, Liz paces the foyer and fondles the telephone, but doesn't use it. Then she rejoins Burke in the drawing room.
Burke goes to enjoy Liz's favorite pastime, window gazing, but she says it's better in the daytime. You can really see the view. She's offering him some tea and flitting around and being oddly polite in stark contrast to her previous behavior.
She's being friendly now and accuses him of being nervous. And I thought, ooh, is she trying to seduce him?
That would, I'd pay, pay
But
good money for that.
she wants to be pals now, and she calls him Roger by mistake and doesn't correct herself until the next sentence. She's like, now, Roger, why don't you sit down? Because blah, blah, blah. I mean, Burke.
It was good.
Yeah, it was funny. She is making small talk and wants to know what he thinks about the changes to the town since he's been away, and Vicky enters, surprised to find Burke there. Liz tells her to entertain Burke because she needs to go get the tea. Burke is befuddled by Liz's sudden friendly shtick, and Vicky wants to know what he's doing there, and he's like, I don't know.
I think I'm having tea, which was funny.
And then he asks after David, saying that he's a nice kid and he likes him, and then he goes to flirt with Vicky, but they have zero chemistry, I think.
I don't think so. I actually think that when they do their sharing here in a little bit, it's very sweet. And I think there is this sort of quiet rapport between them of both having kind of fucked up childhoods and both kind of resenting the Collinses, or at least, well, so Vicky doesn't necessarily resent the Collinses, but she could if she knew that she were their foundling, most likely. So I don't know. I think they work well together. I don't read that they don't have chemistry.
Well,
We can agree to disagree.
at the Blue Whale, Sam is explaining his activities over the course of the evening, and he assures Roger that he didn't tell on him to Burke. Sam has decided that maybe he does want the money that Roger offered to him to leave town, but Roger is being a petty bitch and is like, well, that offer has expired. And
Yeah.
they both suspect one another of killing Bill. After Roger has left, Sam calls Maggie on the payphone to say that he's coming home, but Roger comes back to say that maybe he's changed his mind and maybe he will pay him off to skip town. But now Sam has changed his mind and doesn't want to anymore because he's realized that if he runs now, it will make him look guilty for Bill's murder.
Well, and that's what was funny is that they both at the same time sort of realized that it would benefit and not benefit. And that tickled me.
Yes, and they are also engaged in one of my favorite TV tropes that my husband and I always joke about, which is talking very loudly about a very secret thing in a public place well within earshot of several witnesses. Because
Absolutely.
Roger is practically yelling, "We don't want people to find out that I actually did the manslaughter that Burke went to jail for. You know that one time when I did the manslaughter and you know about how I did the manslaughter, but we both lied about it for a decade. You remember that?" It's very fun.
It's good.
Back at Collinwood in the drawing room, Burke and Vicky are doing small talk now, and this is the sweet moment I think you're referring to.
Yeah, he's telling her about his dad, and she's telling him about her dreams of being a circus horse girl with sparkles on a white horse. That
I
was
was
funny.
reminded of that Designing Women storyline. Where the accountant that stole all of Suzanne's money bought a circus with it
I
and
don't
came
remember
back to
that
town and
one.
has bought her a circus.
I know I've watched it, but
Well,
I
that's
don't
what
remember that one.
that reminded me
That's
of.
funny. Anyway, the rapport was genuinely sweet to me, but they were just sort of sharing their pasts. And
Burke is flirting, but I don't get the impression that Vicky is.
no, I think she is.
I don't know if maybe, and I'm sure the actress probably wouldn't mind my saying so too much, considering she quit acting after Dark Shadows. But I don't know if maybe I just get that impression due to her limitations as a performer, because she always kind of just seems vacant and aloof. So
Well, yeah.
I don't know. But Liz comes back in, and Burke starts to tell her to cut the pretend friendly business, but Roger interrupts by slamming the door on his return. And so Liz rushes out to tell him that Burke is there, and he pulls a face. End credits.
And that was it, folks. That we ran through that pretty quick.
So, in review, everybody thinks everybody else killed Bill, and Matthew tried to kill Burke, and that's really all that happened this week.
I like screen time with Liz. I miss not having any little creepy David of the damned corn. I do like him when he's around, but
Well, he'll be back soon.
yeah.
It's almost his time to shine. Anyway, do you have anything else to say about this week's episodes?
I mean, it was a little dry, but it wasn't bad, and I enjoy
The acting
Maggie a
was
lot.
the acting was particularly bad this week.
It
They must have
was.
been extra rush. Everybody was fucking up.
Everyone was, yeah. It wasn't just
The usual
the usual
suspects of
suspects.
Liz, mostly.
Mostly Liz and sometimes Roger, and every now and again,
But
Sam.
But Roger is good at like rolling with the punches, and
Yeah.
when he fucks up, he makes it seem like the character just misspoke.
Yes, he does well with that. And he is a good actor. And I do enjoy his whiny, smarmy, dandy performance. I enjoy that a great deal. I don't like Roger as a character, but I don't
But
think
you're
you're
not supposed to
so he
like
does a good
Roger.
job.
Which, you know, I say grudgingly the same of Sam because I hate him, but I think
See,
you're supposed to, or maybe you're not supposed to.
I
Maybe at the time this was released in the 60s, Sam was supposed to be relatable as the alcoholic, abusive father.
so that is, and we're gonna just talk about it again because I think I got attached to the first Sam, who I read as genuinely was a nice guy, and now he's just in all this. He's in over his head, and he's fucked up with it, and he's not being a good father and he's not being a good man, but he's not exactly being an awful or evil one. He's just a man that has been sort of corralled and corrupted and stuck in this drama with these people that he never really signed up to be a part of. I mean, he did because he took whatever bribe Roger gave him, whatever, like, because there's money, various
I'm not
things.
sure if they've explicitly discussed that. I think they have at this
They
point.
have
That
to a point
basically Roger gave him the equivalent of like 50 grand for some
for
shitty
some
motel paintings
to be
as
silent.
bribery to not reveal that he saw them switch seats or something.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think that it went into detail about the switching seats because I think we only recently discovered that they did switch seats.
Mhm.
However, I guess what I'm saying is the first Sam to me carried a more sympathetic note. And I think that if he had continued being Sam, then yes, he is a sympathetic character. The way this actor is portraying him and interpreting him does not seem to be in any way sympathetic. He's just garbage. He's literally just awful. And I hate him. To me, the first Sam was annoying because he was a drunk. But if he were sober, he probably would have been an okay guy. He's just down on his luck and he's gotten himself in over his head. I mean, New Matthew, you are right. He is a creep and he is creepy. And I think that he fits this role. And I think what is happening relatively well. But I did like the first one better still.
Please follow us on Instagram at Ghosts Want You Dead. Also, beware, we're going to launch a Patreon and start begging you for money.
Yes, please give us money. We will say,
Stretch your wallets, it's coming. Okay.
Okay, guys. Until next time. I don't know. Bye.